Heart-shaped lights dangled from every lamppost along Madison Avenue, casting pink shadows across the sidewalk where couples walked arm in arm. February 14th. The whole city was in love. That's when Julian Thorne stepped out of his limousine. He needed air. The board meeting had lasted 4 hours, and his lawyers had just delivered the verdict. 48 hours to prove Biovance was committing fraud or face a defamation lawsuit that could destroy everything he'd built. Julian loosened his tie and walked, past a florist closing shop, past a restaurant where a man was down on one knee, past the Biovance Plaza tower that had dominated the financial news for weeks. That's when he heard her. A woman crying. Not unusual in New York. People cried here all the time, but this woman was crying about numbers. "Mom, I can't sign it." Julian slowed his pace. On a wooden bench, partially hidden by construction scaffolding, sat a woman in a pink coat, too thin for February. She clutched a phone to her ear with one hand. The other hand gripped a baby stroller. The XF90 shipment doesn't exist. They've been running it through a Cayman subsidiary, off-balance sheet financing. If I sign, I'm an accessory to fraud. Julian stopped walking. Off-balance sheet financing, Cayman Islands, XF90. These weren't words you heard from strangers on park benches. The woman's voice cracked. "I know Sophie needs her treatment. I know the insurance ends tomorrow, but they're asking me to certify that $200 million in fake inventory actually exists." Julian found himself moving toward her. "They said if I don't sign by morning, they terminate me for cause. No severance. Sophie's treatments cost $40,000 a month without insurance." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I have $1,100 in my savings account, Mom." The woman looked up as Julian approached. Mascara had traced dark rivers down her cheeks. Her eyes were red but sharp. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping her face. "I'll move." "You mentioned the Cayman structure." She froze. "Biovance," Julian said. "Their SPE network." The color drained from her face. She pulled the stroller closer. "Who are you? Did Richard send you?" "Richard Sterling, the CEO?" Her fingers hovered over her phone screen. "I'm calling the police. I'm not with Biovance." Julian held up his hands. "My name is Julian Thorne. I run a hedge fund. We've been investigating them for months." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Thorne Capital. You're the one who shorted their stock. You follow financial news. I'm their senior financial analyst." She paused. "Where I was, until 3 hours ago when I refused to sign falsified inventory certifications." Julian felt the pieces clicking together. "What's your name?" She hesitated. The child in the stroller stirred, making a small sound that immediately drew her attention. "Elena. Elena Vasquez. Elena." Julian studied her face. "You said something about your daughter's treatment." Her jaw tightened. "That's none of your business." "You're right, it isn't." He pulled out his phone. "But I'm going to make it my business anyway. How much do you need?" Elena stared at him. "I don't take money from strangers." "Then think of me as an investor making a bet." "On what?" "On you." She laughed, but it was a bitter sound. "You don't even know what I know." "Then tell me." Elena glanced at her daughter. 3 years old, sleeping peacefully, unaware that her mother's world was collapsing. "Sophie has Batten disease," Elena said quietly. "Rare genetic disorder. Without treatment, children usually don't live past their teens. Biovance's Nerve X was supposed to change that." Her voice hardened. 6 months ago, I found anomalies in the trial data. Patients being transferred to hospice facilities before the study ended. She met Julian's eyes. "Do you know what that means?" Julian knew exactly what it meant. They were removing adverse events from the data set. Elena nodded. 15% of pediatric patients showed liver failure. Biovance's projections showed that disclosing this would delay FDA approval for years. So they buried it. They didn't just bury it. They created shell companies to hide the patient transfers. Children who were supposed to be getting better were being sent to die quietly, off the books. Julian felt something cold settle in his stomach. He'd seen corporate corruption before, but using dying children as statistical conveniences was something else entirely. And the XF90? Pure financial fraud, fake inventory shipments to inflate revenue. The Cayman subsidiary receives goods that don't exist, pays for them with loans that get converted to equity. $200 million in revenue that never happened. Enough to prop up the stock price until they can push Nervex through. Elena's expression flickered. or until someone buys them out based on inflated numbers. There were rumors about Pfizer. Julian's mind was already racing ahead. This woman had everything he needed. The question was whether she would give it to him. "Do you have documentation?" Elena's face hardened. "You think I'd be crying on a park bench if I had enough evidence?" "Sterling locked me out of the system the moment I refused to sign." "Everything?" She paused. Something flickered across her face. "I have some emails on my personal phone. Things I forwarded to myself when I first noticed the discrepancies. But they're not enough. They're suggestive, not conclusive." "What would be conclusive?" Elena looked at him for a long moment. "Sterling keeps a private server in his office. Everything the FDA never saw is there. Every patient transfer, every fake shipment. Can you access it?" "I'd need to physically be in his office. And after tonight, there's no way I'm getting past security." Julian looked up at the Biovance tower. 50 floors of glass and steel, with Sterling's office at the top. "What if you could get past security?" Elena followed his gaze. "What are you talking about?" "I own 11% of Biovance stock. As a major shareholder, I have certain rights." "They'd never let you near his private server." "No, but they might let you near it. If you went back claiming you'd changed your mind about signing." The color drained from Elena's face. "Sterling threatened my daughter's medical care tonight. He made it very clear what would happen if I didn't cooperate." Julian knelt down so he was at eye level with her. "Elena, right now, Biovance is preparing to launch a drug that causes liver failure in children. Your daughter isn't the only one who needs Nervex. Thousands of families are waiting, believing it will save their children." Elena's eyes drifted to Sophie. "I can't protect her if I'm in prison for corporate espionage. New York is a one-party consent state. If you're part of the conversation, you can record it. And if Sterling doesn't admit to anything..." Julian pulled out his phone, typed in a series of numbers, and turned the screen toward her. "A wire transfer confirmation. $300,000 to New York Presbyterian Hospital. Pediatric Rare Disease Treatment Fund. Patient name, Sophie Vasquez." Elena's hand flew to her mouth. "Sophie's treatment is paid for," Julian said. 6 months, regardless of what happens next. You don't have to make this decision because you're desperate. You get to make it because you choose to." Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do that without knowing if I'll help you?" Julian's expression shifted. Something almost human. "Because I've been the person on that bench, Elena. A long time ago. Someone helped me when I had nothing to offer in return." He gestured toward his limousine. "Come with me. Let me show you what we're fighting against, then you can decide." Elena looked at the car, then at her daughter, then at the Biovance tower. "If you're lying to me," she said, "if this is some kind of trap, I will destroy you." Julian smiled. It was the first genuine smile he'd had in months. "I believe you, Elena Vasquez. I absolutely believe you." 2 hours later, Elena stood in Julian's penthouse on the 63rd floor of 157. The elevator opened directly into a marble foyer. A single piece of abstract art dominated the wall. Blacks and silvers, probably cost more than her annual salary. She held Sophie's car seat, suddenly aware of how out of place she was. "The nursery is down the hall," Julian said. "Second door on the left." Elena blinked. "You have a nursery?" Something flickered across Julian's face, too quickly to read. "I have a lot of rooms I don't use." She didn't press. The nursery was beautiful, soft yellows and whites, a crib still wrapped in plastic, never used. That much was obvious. When Elena returned, Julian stood before a wall of monitors. Bloomberg terminals, news feeds, charts and graphs. "This is everything we've gathered on Biovance," he said. 8 months of research, $2 million in investigation. Elena leaned in. Within 30 seconds, she spotted the problem. "Your depreciation model is wrong." Julian turned. "Excuse me?" "Here," she pointed. "You're using straight-line depreciation for intangible assets. Biovance uses accelerated depreciation for everything tied to R&D. That's why your projections are off by 14%. Julian stared at her. "You found a 14% variance in 30 seconds. I've been staring at their books for 3 years. Julian pulled out a chair. "Sit, tell me everything." For 3 hours, Elena talked. Julian listened. She drew diagrams showing how patient data flowed from trial centers to hospice facilities. how deaths were reclassified as voluntary withdrawals, how the revenue was laundered through intercompany loans, and she told him what Sterling had said tonight. He said the FDA inspector was handled, his exact words, $3 million through a shell company in Singapore. Julian leaned back. That's not just securities fraud, that's federal corruption. If we can prove it, that's the problem. Julian drummed his fingers on the table. Everything you've told me is hearsay. I know. Silence stretched between them. There might be a way, Julian said finally. Tomorrow morning, Biovance is holding an emergency board meeting. They're voting on whether to sue my fund. As a major shareholder, I have the right to attend. They won't let you bring anyone. No, but they might let my legal counsel wait in a conference room. He met her eyes. And if that legal counsel happened to slip away, Elena shook her head. Security will know I don't work there anymore. They will if you use the front door. She thought about the service entrance 52nd Street, the loading dock, the fire stairs. I know a way in, she admitted. But if you're caught, you were retrieving personal belongings, trespassing at worst. Elena closed her eyes. 47 names. She'd seen them in Sterling's files. 47 children transferred to hospice facilities after showing liver failure. 47 families who had trusted Biovance. I'll need something to record with, she said. Something they won't detect. Julian smiled. I think I can arrange that. The next morning was gray. Elena had slept maybe 2 hours. Sophie had woken at 6, confused by the unfamiliar surroundings but quickly distracted by toys that had somehow materialized overnight. Elena suspected Julian had made a call. Now she stood in Julian's bathroom, wearing a navy suit that fit perfectly. The recording device was built into a pen. 24 hours of capacity. Real-time upload to a secure server. Even if they catch you, Julian had explained, even if they confiscate everything, the recording will already be uploaded. Elena clipped the pen to her jacket and took a breath. In the living room, Julian was dressed for battle. Charcoal suit, white shirt, no tie. The board meeting starts at 9. I'll make sure my presentation runs 45 minutes. That's your window. Elena nodded. What if Sterling doesn't say anything incriminating? Then we proceed with what we have. Julian handed her a small earpiece. If anything goes wrong, say the word protocol. I'll create a distraction. What kind of distraction? The kind that involves accusing a Fortune 500 CEO of murder in front of his entire board. Despite everything, Elena almost laughed. You're insane. I prefer strategically flexible. Julian checked his watch. Ready? She thought about Sophie, about the 47 names. No, she said, but I'm going anyway. The service entrance was exactly where Elena remembered. 2 guards today. Not one. Julian's voice crackled in her earpiece. I'm heading into the boardroom. 45 minutes. Starting now. Elena waited until both guards looked at their screens, then walked across the street. The keycard beeped. The door clicked open. She stepped through. The service corridors were fluorescent and scuffed. She walked like she belonged. 50 flights of fire stairs, her legs burned by the 40th floor. Sterling's domain, the 50th floor. Carpeted hallway, original artwork. His office was at the end. Door closed. Everyone was in the boardroom, watching Julian. Elena tried the handle. Locked, of course. Then she remembered. Sterling's private bathroom, connected to both his office and the hallway. She found the door and pushed. It opened. Marble and gold fixtures. The bathroom of a man who believed his bodily functions deserved a throne room. The connecting door to the office. She tried it. It opened. She was in. The private server hummed in the corner. Elena moved quickly, typing in the override code Sterling had given her 3 years ago. Green light. Access granted. She plugged in the USB drive. Every file, every email, every document. Progress bar. 10%, 20%. Through her earpiece, Julian's voice. Ladies and gentlemen, I understand your concerns about our fund's position on your stock. 30%. 40%. We've identified irregularities in your Cayman subsidiary structure. 50%. 60%. We're simply asking questions your shareholders have the right to ask. 70%. A door slammed. Footsteps. 80%. That's enough. Elena turned. Richard Sterling stood in the doorway. Behind him, 2 security guards. Elena. His voice was almost pleasant. I had a feeling you might try something stupid. 83%. Richard, I can explain. No, you can't. He walked toward her. In 30 seconds, these gentlemen will escort you to a holding room until the police arrive. The pen. Still recording. Elena forced herself to speak calmly. You're going to call the police? And explain what? That I was accessing files proving you falsified clinical trial data? Something shifted in Sterling's eyes. You have nothing. That drive is encrypted. 90%. Maybe. Or maybe I know the decryption key is embedded in the server image metadata. Sterling's smile cracked. You're bluffing. Am I? You gave me that code yourself, Richard, 3 years ago. 95%. Sterling turned to the guards. Remove her, now. The guards moved forward. Elena made a decision. She pulled the drive free even though the download wasn't complete. You can take this, she said, but it's already been uploaded. The SEC will have it by morning. It was a lie. Mostly. You stupid bitch. Sterling's civility vanished. Do you have any idea what you've done? Biovance employs 30,000 people. The Nervex pipeline is killing children, Richard. 15% of them. You buried that data. You transferred children to hospice facilities so their deaths wouldn't count against your approval numbers. Those patients were terminal anyway. We gave them hope. You gave them liver failure. Sterling lunged and grabbed her wrist. His fingers dug in with painful force. Give me the drive. No, he twisted her arm. Elena gasped but held on. I said give it to me. And I said no. Sterling raised his free hand. Elena flinched. He grabbed for the drive. She twisted away. Her foot caught on the carpet. She fell backward against his desk. The USB drive flew from her grasp, skittering across the floor toward the guards. One of them bent to pick it up. The door burst open. Julian walked in. Behind him, the entire Biovance board of directors. What the hell is going on here? Sterling released Elena's arm. This woman broke into my office. She's stealing company property. Is that so? Julian looked at Elena, sprawled against the desk, then at the USB drive in the guard's hand. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you just assaulted a woman gathering evidence of fraud. The board members murmured, This has nothing to do with you, Thorne. I'm an 11% shareholder. Everything in this company is my business. Julian stepped between Sterling and Elena. Step back, now. Sterling looked at the board members in the hallway, their investors, their oversight. Slowly, he stepped back. This isn't over, Julian smiled. You made your mistake 3 years ago, Richard. I'm just the one who noticed. He extended his hand to Elena. Are you all right? She took his hand and let him help her up. Her arm was throbbing. Bruises were forming on her back. But she was alive. I'm fine. She paused. The download was at 95%. Julian's eyes widened. 95% of what? Everything. The next 72 hours were a blur. Federal agents arrived at Biovance before noon. The SEC had received an anonymous tip. Incomplete data, but enough for probable cause. Richard Sterling was arrested trying to board a private jet to the Bahamas. The images of him in handcuffs dominated the news for weeks. Biovance stock dropped 62% in the first hour of trading. Julian's short position generated profits he seemed embarrassed to discuss. But none of that mattered to Elena as much as what happened on the second day. Her phone rang. New York Presbyterian Hospital. Miss Vasquez, this is Dr. Chen. I'm calling about Sophie. Elena's heart stopped. Is she okay? She's fine, more than fine. The excitement in his voice was unprofessional for a physician. Her latest scans show her condition is stabilizing. The disease markers are significantly reduced. Stabilizing? It's too early to call it remission, but whatever you're doing, keep doing it. After she hung up, Elena sat very still. Julian found her there, staring at nothing, tears streaming down her face. He sat down beside her on the couch. What's wrong? She told him what Dr. Chen had said. Julian listened. Then he did something surprising. He said nothing at all. He just sat there, his shoulder pressed against hers. Eventually the tears stopped. I owe you an apology, Elena said. For what? For assuming you were just using me. You weren't entirely wrong. But that's not all it was it? Julian was quiet. No, it wasn't. Then what was it? He walked to the window. 10 years ago I had a wife. Catherine, we were going to have a child. Elena understood. The nursery. Julian nodded. Catherine was diagnosed during her second trimester. Rare blood disorder. There was a treatment. The insurance company called it investigational. Refused to cover it. His voice was steady, but Elena could see the tension in his shoulders. I wasn't wealthy then. I tried everything, borrowed from everyone. It didn't matter. Catherine died in childbirth. Our daughter lived 3 days. I'm sorry. After the funeral, I went to the insurance company, sat in their lobby for 6 hours, demanded to speak to someone who could explain why my wife and daughter had to die because of a policy provision on page 47. What did they say? Nothing. They called security. A bitter smile. That's when I decided what I was going to do with my life. Elena understood now. The short selling, the investigations, the relentless pursuit of fraud. It wasn't just business. It was war. Is that why you helped me? Partly, but also because you were brave enough to do what I couldn't. What do you mean? When Catherine was dying, I could have gathered evidence, blown the whistle, saved other families, but I was too broken. By the time I put myself together, the moment had passed. He looked at her. You didn't let your grief break you, Elena. You were on that bench, terrified, and when I offered you a way to fight, you took it. I didn't feel brave. I felt desperate. That's the same thing sometimes. 6 months later, Elena stood on the terrace of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The annual Children's Health Charity Gala was in full swing behind her. New York's elite in designer finery. So much had changed. The whistleblower settlement had come through. $47 million. Elena donated half to pediatric research. The rest established the Sophie Foundation. Sophie was thriving. Dr. Chen was cautiously optimistic about her long-term prognosis. She was in school, making friends, living a normal life. The Thorne Vasquez Fund had launched 3 investigations in 6 months. 2 settlements, a 3rd ongoing. There you are. Julian approached with 2 glasses of champagne. Hiding from my own party, Elena admitted, shows excellent judgment. He handed her a glass. The keynote speaker is telling a very long story about golf. Elena laughed and took a sip. Have I thanked you lately? For what? Everything. For stopping that night, for listening to a stranger cry about spreadsheets. Julian leaned against the railing. You weren't a stranger. You were the woman who was going to change my life. I just didn't know it yet. Such confidence. It's called intuition. Also, your depreciation analysis was genuinely impressive. They watched the city lights. Julian, yes, I have a proposal. He raised an eyebrow. On a museum terrace? How romantic. Elena rolled her eyes. Business proposal. The Sophie Foundation needs someone for the board, not as an investor, as a partner. What would my title be? Sophie came up with it. Chairman of Getting Things Done. Julian laughed. A real laugh. She sounds terrifying. She is. You'll love her. He turned to face her. You know, a year ago I thought I knew what my life would look like. Work, money, revenge. And now I'm standing on a museum terrace, being recruited by a woman I met on a park bench. Life is strange. Life is wonderful. He raised his glass. To strange beginnings. Elena clinked her glass against his. And to Valentine's days that take detours. Somewhere in the ballroom, the keynote speaker finally finished. Come on, Julian said. We should go back in. Elena took his arm. Julian? Yes? I'm glad you stopped that night. He smiled. So am I, Elena Vasquez. So am I. Sophie ran up then, dressed in pink, clutching a glass of sparkling cider. Mommy, Mr. Julian, they have chocolate fountains. Elena laughed and scooped her up. Then we absolutely have to investigate. Sophie grabbed Julian's hand and began dragging them both toward the dessert table. The billionaire. The single mother. The little girl who brought them together. Elena thought about all the Valentine's days she'd spent alone. She had a feeling the next one would be different. And that's where our story ends. A Valentine's night that started with tears on a cold bench, ended with 2 people finding something neither expected. A second chance. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe to join our family. New stories drop every day, each one more incredible than the last. Thank you for staying until the end. See you in the next one.